I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 34, Episode 12 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy.
My name is Riley.
My name is Artem.
I'm Jason.
And in today's episode, Steve from Cambridge asks about GMing pace, Eric from New Jersey sends his thanks, and from the archive 2019, Ryan Forflawn struggles, it's a handle, come on, struggles with players rolling for their flaws in D&D. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Or you can post in the mailbag channel of the Discord. That's all going to get organized at some point, sometime soon. Announcements. Our next game days will be September 28th, which is coming up. Join the Discord at happyjacks.org/Discord, which I just said a second ago, to vote on or to play and to submit games. Our Patreon fees have changed. We're looking into options that will help keep the lights on and the mini fridge full, but also be fair to our amazing supporters. Please stay tuned. Right now, as far as I am aware, it's mostly just if you're paying through like Apple Pay. There's like exorbitant fees for that. If you're paying through Apple Pay, don't. If you go straight to Patreon and add in like a credit card or something like that, then it like circumvents those fees. So that's kind of the go-to workaround right now. I get it's really shitty of Patreon to do this, but it's also something that a lot of platforms are struggling with Apple Pay.
Yeah, it's kind of more Apple's fault than Patreon's fault.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And they have the market pressure to do it.
Yeah. So we're trying to look into things that may or may not fix it because it seems like it's kind of a universal issue. Stay tuned. Patrons will stay communicative about that. Speaking of which, we've started a round of studio updates. It's off camera. You can't see it, but we have a new stand for our soundboard that makes it easier for the producer. And we have like space on the table now for the producer, which you can't see, but I have space. I'm not all crammed. Although now I'm closer to Riley, which is nice. I like that part. Yeah. But we also have a new table that Jason's very nicely volunteered to build tomorrow, put together, assemble. It's not build, assemble tomorrow.
Assemble. It's like,
Yes, exactly. It's done. And we have a new microphone that we've purchased rather than the one that's sort of like jury-rigged right now. So we'll have an official fifth player seat that will like be like there permanently. And poor Jason won't have to like be all crammed with
it
like,
really
the weird...
wasn't that bad, but like another table option will be better.
Yeah, and
so
you
thank
actually will have like a space on the table in front of you that you can use. It'll be great.
Yeah. I was having to like sort of lean into the frame of like, and me.
Yeah. And the rest.
And Peggy.
Yeah.
Peggy.
And Peggy.
I'm also rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's that desk, this new stand, a new shotgun mic. We have purchased some additional lights that it may be a little while before we hang them because it's miserable in this studio most of the day because it's like 105 in LA right now. Mm-hmm. So the studio is very, very hot during the day. But they're LED based, so we'll get more light in here. We're not replacing the lights we have, we're just adding. And so they'll add more light without any heat, which will be great.
That's
very exciting.
amazing.
Yeah, we're very excited.
So cool.
Yeah, so all the stuff we've kind of been planning for a while. When things went sideways with our Patreon charges a few months ago, we had to like delay because things got a little screwy. But then it's all back now, so we can actually move forward with the plans we made. Thank you so much to our amazing Patreons for making this possible. We really appreciate you. Yay!
Huzzah.
All right, Indie Designer of the Month. It is September. We have a new Indie Designer of the Month. This month it is Steve D. Him from Tin Star Games. You can find them at tinstargames.itch.io or tinstargames.com. This week we are discussing partners. One's a real straight shooter. The other's a total wild card. Together, chasing down mystery. They are partners.
Partners.
I did part. Yeah, that was like into that. Okay. Partners is a unique storytelling game where the plot is procedurally generated using random words and regular playing cards. Two players will build up their very own detective show, 4 suspects, and a solution to the mystery even they won't see coming. You just need a deck of cards and the desire to butt heads to solve crimes.
Sounds great.
It also has a ton of supplements, some of which we might talk about in the next few weeks in different settings. There's like a cyberpunk one and a Cthulhu one, and all these
Partner.
things. Yeah, exactly. So you can get that for $25.
Wait, that's something different. Hang on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's very different.
Rewind. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna laugh if it's named that. It might be.
Yeah, Riley's asking everyone to visit cyberpartner.com.
No,
I am not. Hey, let me know your ASL.
I mean, if you're into it,
Yeah,
whatever.
if you're into that thing.
Yeah, we're not kinks.
Please don't tell me it. I don't want to know.
And you can get partners for $25 on tinstargames.itch.io. Yeah. So welcome, new indie designer of the month. Very exciting. Woo!
Sorry to Steve D for bringing up that in the middle of your promo.
That does sound fun. I would try it.
I know. I love the one's a straight shooter, the other's a total wild card.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. All right.
Nice.
Mailbag number 1. Who would like to read this? I'm not doing it.
I can kick it off.
Can I dibs the flaws one? I heard. I was
then I'll do
looking at
number
that.
2.
Is that cool?
Sure.
Ooh,
All right.
On the head.
I love flaws.
All right, here
Right.
we go. Mailbag number 1. Greets Kimmy and crew of the good ship Happy Jack.
That's us.
Hey! I've always known that I was slow. By which I mean, as a GM, it just seems to take me a lot longer to cover the same ground as other and better GMs. Oh,
So are you
come
the
on,
straight shooter or are you the wild card here?
Oh, come on. I'll mix both. I don't know. I know this because on the rare times when I run published scenarios, it takes me at least 50% longer in real world time to complete them than others report. Okay, it's got data. It's good.
Okay. I was going to say, like,
Then others report. Okay, all right.
also, I want to just delete the and better. Like, as other GMs, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't mean they're better.
Yeah.
Slower
Okay.
is not worse.
True.
From your dyslexic GM, okay?
We GMs are famously self-beating. Deprecating.
Yeah.
Self-beating upping.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's the like APA term. Yeah.
So moving on. Similarly, when my creations are run by others in actual plays or conventions, they are able to complete these games in perhaps 2/3 of the time that it takes me. I'm just slow.
This reminds me of Baymax. I'm not fast.
I used to tell myself that I was giving my players a richer, more nuanced experience by slowing down and savoring the role play. The GMing equivalent of their slow food movement, if you will.
Yum, yum,
I would
yum.
present a situation, ask a player what their character does and what their intentions were, and then adjudicate the outcome.
What are your intentions with my NPC?
How slow do you want to eat this food? The story would then develop out of this interaction, and we would all see where it took us, whilst still considering what the world was doing and how I was responding in the meantime. All right. However, I recently started to wonder if this slow GMing is a bad thing. Some GMs can keep the story just fizzing along, moving seamlessly from one exciting scene to another. Fizzing. What if my players are being robbed of a non-trivial quantity of fun per hour by my GM style?
FPH, yeah.
The inbuilt optimizer in me cringes in horror at this possibility. Before I go further, I should clarify what I'm not talking about. I am not talking about pacing, where the GM adjusts the speed of play in a dynamic manner to facilitate an engaging narrative.
Oh.
I'm not talking about first-person versus third-person roleplay, where more first-person just takes a lot longer than third-person. And I'm not talking about the convention rhythm, where a strict time limit and a need to ensure that certain content is covered leads to in-game events happening based on real-world time rather than game time. What I am talking about, have you ever noticed that some GMs seem to be able to keep their players heading towards the fun? Trademark. Clarification. This isn't railroading or having a pre-existing idea about what the fun is. These GMs just seem to be able to keep the story moving from beat to beat. This might be through subtle hints, bold hints, body language, or maybe outright mind control.
That's what I use.
Is it? Isn't that pacing?
I'm confused,
I mean,
but
this
let's
person's really aware of what pacing is. But let's go on.
Okay,
we're
continue.
getting to the heart of it.
Uh-huh.
They're building up. They're ramping up.
let's hear Clara out.
Yeah.
I have a hunch. I have a hunch about what this ineffable quality to GMing might be. I will call this quality narrative direction. To explain, a GM displaying this quality is highly aware of the current story beat. Is it an upbeat, where the players are congratulating themselves on having just vanquished the nasty bog ogre? Or is it a downbeat, where the players realize that the recently vanquished nasty bog ogre has a big sister who is now gunning for their sorry butts? And being aware of the current story beat, the GM is subtly moving the players towards a following beat, hopefully based on the full agency of the player and involving thought-provoking dilemmas with consequences. Sorry, I thought the dilemmas in Wisconsin is what it sounded like in my head. Sorry, hopefully based on the full agency of the player and involving thought-provoking dilemmas with consequences, of course. So my question, if you accept my premise that this narrative direction is a thing, and if you agree that it is a good thing, then how do I increase my use of it in my games, or at least have more control, such that I can turn it on or off as the situation warrants? Thanks, Jackers. Steve from Cambridge at Dosmania on the Discord. P.S. I can't think of a witty postscript. My most sincere apologies. Perhaps taking a drink will help.
Got it in one.
Alrighty.
Well, actually, on the email, I couldn't put it in the show notes, but there's like a very odd YouTube video with a very like high-paced music and like random images
Oh.
shared.
Oh, so it is a link.
Yeah, it's a link,
Because
yeah.
it's underlined.
Why
in
don't you
the
just
image.
print out all the frames of the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Very
could do a flip
random.
Look at a cute little flip.
Yeah, there. Yeah, I did not have time for that.
All right. Sorry
I
about
think our side of the screen is frozen.
apologies for all the stops. I'm sorry. It was,
Yeah, it might be.
I was like, my hat fell off and I put it back on and I didn't see it happen on the screen.
Oh, that's weird.
all right. So yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Steve on professional level, PBTA level capitalization of phrases and words.
Yeah. Bullet
That's-
points too.
Yeah, like we see capitalizing important phrases at almost, and I include this in myself, of like almost compulsive nature, but it draws the attention
Yeah.
and helps provide emphasis. Sorry, emphasis.
Yeah.
But-
and the bullet points are very OSR. This is like a blending of.
Yeah.
Steve knows what he's doing.
So
All right.
beating the narrative. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, so the question is, if you accept the premise that narrative direction is in fact a thing, and if you accept that it's a good thing, how do I increase my use of it in games, or at least have more control, such that I can turn it on or off as the situation warrants? And I think all of that ties into Steve's concern about the slowness, or what Steve perceives to be the slowness of their sessions.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't understand the difference between what he's saying and pacing.
And
So I
pacing,
feel like I'm having a hard
right.
time giving a response fully because
Well-
I don't know exactly what he's
Well, let's
asking
just
about.
say we're also talking about pacing then, right? Like
Yeah.
if the question were meant to include pacing, how would you want to comment on? One thing I wanted to add to this is I wish I knew how long Steve had been GMing.
Yeah.
Right? Because at least it might. Now, maybe Steve's been GMing for 40 years, and that's awesome, right? I've been GMing for 35, and it took a long time to get pacing down. This to me, is what I would call pacing. From how I understand Steve's email.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to get pacing. I don't think there's even like good pacing. I got pacing to where I want it to be. And I mostly do that by sort of mentally timing the spotlight, right? Like if two players are in a scene together, I'm going to let that go until my gut says the other people have been sitting quietly for a little while.
Yeah.
Let's move the spotlight and get them involved. And just doing that is going to move us towards the fun,
Yeah.
as Steve put it. So that's, but all I could say is that came from years and years, like literal decades of trying to make it more fun.
Yeah.
And so,
I think the difference in pacing, at least for Steve's perspective, is like basing what's happening on the events, like what happens in the actual adventure, what's written down, versus what what the person customizes based on the vibes, like what you were just describing. Like, I think if you're like, okay, this has to happen, then this has to happen, and this has to happen in the adventure because that's what it says, I think that's what they're thinking of as pacing.
Yeah.
Versus, I think what you're describing is chasing the fun. And I think it comes from GMing, it comes from anyone who's a public speaker or does presentations or does acting or does teaching. You get this, you practice and you start to get the, okay, I've lost them. Oh, no, they're here. You can tell how attuned and like engaged people are, even if they're not saying anything based on like their body language and that sort of thing. Like a lot of us have been on stage at a time where you're like, wow, this is going poorly, and they are not paying attention. Hey, why is your back turned to me? I'm up here singing.
Yeah.
Why are you looking the opposite direction? That's not ideal.
Like, I know what you're talking about. What do you mean? What? Sorry, what?
What?
Well, I mean, going off of that, I feel like I do want to call out, at least for me, it also sounds like there might be an element, again, of Steve being self-beaty uppy, being a little self-deprecating. And I'll say that this, for me, that's sort of like what instantly pops out is like, when I was struggling a lot with pacing, specifically when playing D&D and running into a lot of issues with like around combat taking forever, right? And I remember reading in the adventures being like, oh, this is an adventure for 3 to 4 players of a particular level, and it should take you about 2 to 4 hours to run. And I would be like, how?
Yeah.
How is this possible? But the thing is, instead of it being a useful indicator, it was extremely debilitating. Not only that, I find it so difficult to run published adventures without instantly going into, I want to follow the fun.
Yeah.
And so, like, almost like I love that, oh, good, there's a framework, there's all this stuff that I'm going to ignore 95% of as soon as my players clue into something 100%. They're really, really into.
Yeah.
But I think there's an element of it when you're trying to be a good student, trying to do it by the book, and your players are off doing a thing, and you're like, fucking it all up because how do I get them back onto this thing that's in this adventure? And then you start thinking about how much time is being spent. I heard a great quote on a podcast that was like, there's a lot of sessions often feel with the GM, for a GM, like they're chasing the dragon, like they're chasing that perfect session. You know,
I thought you meant Tiamat.
There you are. Yeah.
I thought you meant
trying to grab all 5 hands, but you know, it's like they're trying. Yeah, sure, but it is like this incessant, unsatisfying, almost like drive for that elusive perfect session.
Yeah, it does.
And you're trying to get, and you're constantly
feel incredible when you hit that.
and you're trying, and you're constantly comparing your casual, you know, weekly game to like, it was just almost this good. And I think that's where your brain starts to do over analysis and starts to hone in on things that could have realistically not gone well, but then are you objectively looking at the whole picture, right? So yeah.
What's missing from this for me in this discussion on the page is that Steve from Cambridge mentions that they've had other people run the same modules they've run at 2/3 the time or such a thing. But nowhere in the mention is it saying that players have complained or been upset about that time difference.
Right.
And I think that, for me, is what I'm like, are you only noticing a discrepancy between a timing thing when you're comparing yourself to other GMs, or are you having players complain to you that it's taking too long and you're going too slow?
Yeah.
Because I think that, like, in this case, it sounds like part of why it's going so long is that Steve is letting players play out scenes together and follow the fun, like we said, and so that's why it's taking longer. So I don't know if I feel like this sounds like players aren't having a good time at their table.
Yeah.
And that's where I would love to know what the player feedback is compared to the inner judgment you're giving yourself on this topic. Because I also, the recommendation I would have, if this is anything you're concerned about and you genuinely want to know, I would say maybe even the best option I could say is sit in on some of these GMs that are running modules that have a pace that you think you would like to be, a narrative direction that you think you would like to be more akin to, and pay attention to what they're doing and go, what are they doing differently than what I'm doing?
And this is assuming you've already asked your players.
Right.
Right? Like,
right.
Is
That's
this
if you
going
feel
well?
this way. Yeah. Because a good example to come from last week's Strategicon, because I played in 2 different Adventurers League games. I played one with Jason and I played one on Monday. And the one that I
was
played
good and one was bad.
it kind of is
assume.
the one that I didn't play with you was great. No, I'm kidding. No, the one that I played with you, I thought we had a GM who, for the most part, kind of let weird, role plays play out and had fun with it and like let us goof around with some stuff. We still got the story basically told, but we did it at the speed we wanted to and whatever. We only really had 2 major encounters over the course of like a 4-hour session. We had like a couple like build-ups and then like a big thing. Whereas the one that I played on Monday, a lot of times we'd be in like we were, it was Monday, we were feeling goofy, and 4 of us came to the table to play goblins, and we had a GM who was not prepared for 4 goblins at the table. And as a result, kind of just sidestepped it. Like we kind of kept having like moments where they like, okay, you go back to this library, and then they take you to the back room. They start to tell you about this. Like they didn't give us a chance to role play the scenes that we were in because they were trying to like make sure we got through the time period.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like
they were tired of your shit.
but like, yeah, exactly. But like, we talked about it today. We were like, that guy did not care for our goblin shenanigans. But we're 4 professional GMs at the table. Like it wasn't like we were derailing the game. We were just role playing our characters.
GMs are the worst players.
Yeah. But it was like the thing where it was like, yeah, that game went faster, and we sure got done, and we sure killed that dragon. But I would say out of the 2 games that I played in that were Avengers League that weekend, I had a lot more fun at the one where we kind of had a GM that was willing to kind of like pump the brakes a bit and let things play out. So
and like skip a little bit of a thing. Another thing I want to add.
Well, no, I wanted
please.
Okay, we missed a very important component of this email where it says, when my creations are run by others as actual plays or at conventions. So these are adventures that Steve is writing.
Yeah.
So I feel like when you're the author, you're much more like by the book, and you like, I feel like you are adding in a lot of things that a lot of other people are just, not because it's bad, not a judgment thing, but as someone who recently ran an adventure that I'd written a long time ago and forgot most of, like, I skipped a lot of things or did things wrong because I didn't remember how they were supposed to go. And so when you're running an adventure that you haven't written, you're going to run it differently than if you made it. So I think that's a huge experiential difference between you and the people who are running it that aren't you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because I bet there's a lot of elements where you end up being a little more precious with certain things, or less precious because you are feeling like, no, this is what this adventure is about. This is the important thing. We should really spend time here. And,
right.
Yeah. And the audience, aka the players, have moved on.
Yeah.
Or something like they might be interpreting something differently because like you wrote it, you might not have put like a subtlety in there that you understand inherently as part of what's happening. Somebody else might not think that's the most important part of the story. They might move to something else instead.
Yeah, or you're adding world details that maybe aren't in the text because you came up with the world. I find that's what I do a lot when I'm like, hey, there's all this stuff, and you make it up, and it's different when you've made it up and it actually fits with what you've actually written versus like a GM who's like, yeah, and there's an NPC named Steve there. Not you, Steve. A different Steve.
Yeah.
Is the only name I can think of right now. Exactly. That's
We have had
exactly
2 Steves in a row, so
Yeah,
it might be
okay, maybe.
Steve D and then Steve from
That'd be
Cambridge.
fun if we just had like all the same name, like letters of like Steve from New Hampshire, Steve from Florida.
For a while, it was with Kurtz and Jason.
Oh, yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
it gets that way.
So one thing I want to add in here, we were talking about the idea of like checking in with your players, making sure everyone has fun. Like my idea is like if everyone's having fun at the table, then you're doing it right. Yeah. But I want to add the caveat to that I just remembered that literally like 25 years ago, I was running a game, which means I was 8 years old. Nope. No, I'm an old man.
He was 9.
But it was like 2000, 2001. I was running Shadowrun. You can figure out what edition it was. But there's a group of guys, and one of them was always quiet. Most of the time, that was fine. And I had checked in with him a couple times, but I wasn't that mature. I was like doing my best, right? I was 23 or 24, right? Doing my best to be a grown-up. I think I was better at it then. But anyway, this guy was mostly quiet. He would get some zingers in. It seemed like he was having a good time. I checked in with him once or twice, like, hey, it seems like you're kind of quiet. He was like, yeah, it's okay. We're doing it. But then one night, he literally, and we were all in our 20s, and he just lost it, right? Like, it was just like dick and fart jokes all the way down, right? It was Shadowrun, dick and fart joke. And he wasn't really participating in it, and we were whatever. And suddenly he just like, we were all sitting around the living room with like chairs and couches and stuff, not at a table. Threw his pencil down on the floor. It was like, are we gonna play or are you guys gonna fuck around all night? And I was like, oh, you're not having fun, right? And I was like, okay, well, that was one of the big moments where I started to understand Spotlight, right? Of like checking in and making sure everybody's getting what they need out of that experience. And in a way, I'm really glad he sort of blew up in the moment and right there with everybody, and everybody got that blast, right? Of like, oh, he's really upset, that we're here to play games and we play, I don't know, once a week, once every other week. And he was not getting what he wanted out of that because we were like, we could all do better, right? Like it was a totally legitimate criticism, but it was a situation where 5 out of the 6 people in the room were having fun with dick and fart jokes and he wasn't.
Well, also,
right?
you'd also done a check-in and he hadn't been upfront with you.
Right. Well, I think it had never been that bad before.
Right, but there'd probably been, especially if they've blown up that big.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
means
yeah.
there's a simmering underneath.
I agree. And we were all in our early 20s, right? So we were doing our best to be grown-ups, right? That's the only caveat I add to, check in with your players, make sure you're having that spotlight, and if everyone's having fun, you're doing it right. But double check that everyone is having fun, right? Like as you're moving the fun along and doing that, just like really like going and like we keep saying, just have that grown-up conversation. Have it with your table together, have it one-on-one.
I think it's hard though. You can't do that you can do that a little bit at a con, but it's a little weird.
I don't mean at a con. I think we're talking about
you did talk about cons in the letter.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, but the people running it at cons went through it faster than his game at home, I thought was the issue.
I think just in general, people run it fast. I mean, you would expect the people at cons to run it faster. I think he's comparing his con games to...
Oh, I thought he was comparing his home game.
I don't know. I think regardless, like, yes, like always, like it's good to check in with your players, but like when you're chasing the fun, it's if you keep stopping, okay, is everyone having fun?
Well,
that's not going to be fun, and people aren't going to. It's one of those things where it's like you've got to start looking for like very clear body language, like eye contact. Are they looking at you? Like there are obviously like some neurodivergent things. Some people like when I'm paying attention, like I have to be doing something else. So if I'm paying full attention, I'm very engaged. Sometimes I'll be doodling. So it's a little hard to tell. You just need to kind of, when you ask someone a question, are they like, oh, I'm sorry, what's happening? That's a bad sign. So just like ask little questions, like what's happening? Like if you turn, okay, what are you doing right now? And they're like, oh, I'm doing this. Even if they're not looking at you, if they're like, they know exactly what they're doing and exactly what their character's doing, that's a pretty good sign. Even if they have this wild thing or if they're knitting or whatever they're doing. If you see them like staring off or looking around, sometimes that's less of a good sign. Obviously, if they're on their phone or something, that's really not a good sign. While there are some things that, like with neurodivergence, can help focus, generally something that is that distracting actually draws their attention away in most cases. So things that keep their hands busy are very helpful for them to be paying attention. Things that are separate information, unless they're looking up something about the game, which can be very helpful. They're like, wait, I know that in this century they had a crossbow that did this thing, whatever. Like whatever, we do the thing. So there's
or they
lots
like
of
told
things.
you ahead of time they used a tool on their phone for focus. Like I had a player who told me like she used like a fill in the colors game and that helps her stay focused.
Yeah,
That's
and I would
awareness.
Yeah, and I would liken that to like drawing or something like that's not like scrolling Facebook or something like that, where they're like reading completely separate information.
Well, you could have brought up something really interesting. It just reminded me of someone looking at me like, oh, the appropriate crossbow for this time period would be this, which is actually I think might be a good thing still to check in with your players, because I think there's different styles of play, right? Some people want to have that simulationist experience. They want to know how much it hurts to fall off of a horse onto the floor. They want to know
A lot.
How does it feel to have a horse step on your hand?
A lot.
Oh,
it hurts
a lot.
Yeah.
Many hit
bad.
points
And
of
then
damage.
everyone at the ER will keep coming and looking at your x-ray because they can't believe you didn't break any bones.
Because you cast a shield spell just the last moment.
Because your hand is like this weird blue color with a bunch of scraped up skin, and there's like every doctor in the ER comes in and goes, no way. and you're just like, thanks.
It's
Weird to know that you were like the conversation in the hospital break room. You gotta check out this game.
You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that.
Yeah.
Have you seen the girl with the horse hand?
100%.
Have you seen Horse Hand?
Is it horse?
Yeah.
Horse Hand
Horse
Swim
Hand.
down in 23B.
But it's something about that I think is important to check in about, because I think the idea of emergence and really feeling like you're actually plugged into the world really ends up adding to the pace and how you're engaging with other elements of the world. I did this very cheeky thing in the game that Jason was
What?
with.
You?
That's right. At Strategicon, I ran a Mouse Ritter adventure, which was super fun. Jason was in it, and I did this cheeky thing.
It was
where,
okay.
Okay. I had a good time.
I actually had a blast.
Thanks, buddy. But I did this funny thing. I thought it was funny, where I said, "All right, gang. Well, this adventure is we're going to make some characters. Then we're going to set the vibe. Then this is going to be an adventure where you are going to be a rescuing party. So at some point there's going to be a hook." And I said these things out loud. And then at some point I said, "Well, I think the vibe was pretty set, but we all say the vibe is good. Great. Here comes the hook, everybody." I was really intentional, just saying, we're all playing a game. We all know it's a game. Also, we're all cute fucking tiny mice.
Yep.
So there's a level of we can definitely disassociate. We don't have to be fully immersed into that. Whereas I think if you're doing a super simulationist, some kind of rogues sneaking around, somebody being like, "Well, this guy comes around the corner and this is the hook, everybody." That might take somebody out of it, but you got to have that conversation, right? So I do think that at a certain level, if you're having a weekly game, you could probably have a pretty okay conversation with your players and saying,
Oh, yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah.
me personally, I'm not sure if this is going fast or not. Is it okay if I just call certain things out? Is it all right if we have some kind of a language about, at one of my tables, I have a monthly game with my wonderful gay bears. I see them once a month. We play the Run of the Frost Maiden game.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's just all gay bears. It's
Amazing.
wonderful.
That's awesome.
And one of them came up with a taffy move.
Oh,
I think I was
nice.
telling you at the time.
Oh yeah.
It just goes
Alongside the X card.
yeah, alongside the X card or the yes button, there's also the taffy card. And the taffy card is, "Hey gang, I think at this point we're just beating around the bush. We really stretched the story thing. We stretched this taffy as far as we
I
go."
love that. That's
and it's
fun.
really cute because it's a way for all of them to have a shorthand to be like, "Oh, we're done doing bits. Let's get on with the story."
Yeah.
It's are we fucking around or are we playing tonight?
Yeah.
But a nice way. I don't mind what we did here, but it feels done.
Yeah. And it's cute enough to do taffy. Everybody goes, "You're right. You're right.
cute.
Let's do
Yeah.
it."
Yeah, I feel like "Are we fucking around? Are we playing tonight?" is also a phrase that, depending on the inflection and the tone of voice, can be really sweet or fun, or is terrifying and a memory you think about 25 years later. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
never forget when my GM yelled at me in high school. It was all another high school student, but he was getting mad that we were all goofing around in the game, and he was he'd shut the game down and shouted, and a lot of people didn't come back ever again because nope, that's it.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the topic that we kind of had earlier about narrative direction when we're talking about people feeling like they're being left out of game or seeing two characters going on for too long and everyone else is sitting out and things like that. I've had two different versions. The game that I was playing instead of playing in your game, because your game was full and lovely, but what I was playing in First Sword Lesbians at the same time at the con, and what they did at that table for spotlighting was everyone had a card in front of them that had "I'm waiting for my turn," and then you flip it over once you had your turn. And I wouldn't do it for every RPG, but for a game like that, especially where every single round is about character interaction and things like that, it wouldn't be bad for a game like Starscape with a similar emotions and personality based game. But it was a really good way of, especially at a con, of making sure nobody was getting skipped over, because it was a good visual that the GM could look and see okay, these are all the red cards they've gone, there's one green card, so I'm ready, here's what it is. And then there was one time though where for me I was I don't really have a thing this round, I'm just gonna flip it over and we can keep going forward, because I feel like I've already I think I was part of somebody else's scene already anyway, so I'm
I
good.
got what I needed out of this. We can move on.
Yeah. And when I ran my Doctor Who podcast, because Doctor Who is a show that often has characters split off and do different things from each other, I kept that spirit on the show. A lot of what I would do is run a 5-minute timer whenever I had a character separate for a scene, and I never was okay, 5 minutes are up, you can't have any more of this scene. The timer was for me as a GM to go, okay, this scene has gone on for 5 minutes. Are we at a point right now where we should keep going with this scene, or should we cut away and come back, or should we end this scene?
Yeah.
And it was just a good, it wasn't a thing for the players. I wasn't hurrying them.
Do I snooze the timer or? move on.
Do I snooze the
Yeah.
timer or do I cut away and like the nice thing when you have multiple scenes going on a format like that kind of game where it's usually like solving a mystery or exploring
Yeah.
a space, usually you can cut away to somebody and then cut back and like we're having this dialogue or whatever.
Well, and especially when the game you're playing is for a performance, right? A podcast.
That
or
is very
actual
true.
player,
That is
like
for
It's
a-
a little different. Than,
yeah, and it
everybody's
needs to be
on
a
in a
tight
different way,
content
yeah.
for a podcast. Exactly. If we weren't playing it for a podcast, I might have let scenes go on longer. But we even had times where we were doing it for a when I was still playing as the Doctor, and other games that I've been in where I've had situations where, as a player at a table, if I feel like I've been left out of the game for like a half hour or more, I definitely check out of the game entirely,
Sure.
and it's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Like if my ADHD
yeah.
and my rejection sensitivity both pile in, and I'm like, do you guys don't want to play with me? Are we fucking around? Or are we here to play?
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
Yeah. I mean, Steve does bring up actual plays. So like I think that might be part of it too. If you're comparing your home game especially, but even your regular con game to something that's an actual play, like that's completely different. That's like comparing, oranges to marmalade. Like those
Yeah.
are just two completely like I mean they sort of started the same, but they're very different.
Yeah,
Marmalade's
they
made out
serve
of
it-
oranges, right?
Depends.
Okay.
Tangerines,
Could
like
be any-
yeah.
Okay. Some sort of
yeah.
citrusy thing.
Yeah.
I don't cook. So.
I put
I know,
lemon.
she's that lady in France who
There you go,
wants me to
yes.
come home with her tonight.
Um,
yeah.
We do lemons and tangerines because that's what I have in my yard.
I love a sweet sour dessert.
Amazing.
I did want to actually point out that one of the things that Steve is asking about is also this quality that he's calling the narrative direction. And he's referring to these upbeats and downbeats, which remind me of I think it's a book by a Professor Robin Laws called Hamlet's Hit Points, and it's this idea of upbeats and downbeats and what your players are feeling, and therefore what if they're feeling an upbeat, great, then that needs to be complemented with a downbeat coming up. Oh, they've been in a downbeat, you let them plateau so that they kind of like process, and then give them an upbeat so they have a sense of success, like these like ideas. And I
Yeah.
think what he's sort of suggesting here is he's struggling also with whether or not did my characters just experience what would be effectively an upbeat? Would it be better for this to be an upbeat? Would it be better if I brought in some drama? Should they be excited about this moment or should they regret this moment? And I think that's a different kind of question because it's less about pace. It's more about what do my players want right now?
Right. I think for that, like you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Did I catch you?
No, I was gonna say it kind of comes back to the point we all keep coming back to. Is like I don't know. You can ask your players.
Yeah.
What are you in the mood
Yeah.
for?
But also look at your writing. If you're writing these adventures, what have you written? What has been the focus or the voice that you've used for these adventures? Is it about what the emotions and what the emotional journey of the characters is, or is it about this is happening and then this is happening and this is happening? Because those are two completely different ways to write adventures for games. Sometimes the same game, and you'll get very different experiences that way. So not looking at this specific adventure, if it's a very point A to point B to point C, not railroady, but just like action and task based or scene based rather than emotional beat based, then maybe that's what people are adding in. Maybe people who are GMing this game, and I'm not saying you're not doing it right because we've already talked about how you are probably being harder on yourself than you should be. But assuming you are wanting to pull some of that in, like maybe that's what they're finding rather than focusing on the text as written or the events in sequence. Maybe they're pulling out okay, this is a good moment for a pause here, or let's speed through this so that this has a bigger punch here, and that sort of thing, kind of like stretching the toffee if you were. I'm so hungry now. Yeah.
Yeah, good work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot what I was about to say, so it doesn't matter.
All right, mailbag number 2.
All right, here we go. To Kimmy and the rest of the Happy Jacks crew. Look, this is a bit heavy for an email. I don't mind it being read on the show, but only if you want to. If you don't want to, please share it with your fellow hosts. This is in response to Orc with Pie conflict generation, oddly enough. Something that Jason said about prep tools and actually having years upon years of prep is what helps them run games gave me pause. They were absolutely right about that. You see, I lost all that. Depression and anxiety are a horrible pair, and at one point in my life led to a lot of self-destructive behavior. It was enough that people had to intervene, and I ended up on a regimen of medicine. I was ill, and I needed medicine to help deal with the situation. Side effects happened, though, and both my concentration and creativity suffered. I didn't GM for a long time, while because certain things just didn't click anymore. Creative processes that used to just spring to mind were now a struggle. Even on the meds, I was very saddened because I had lost that part of myself that I really liked. What good is living if you can't do the things you love? I just want to give a quick hug to people in the audience who that might have been kind of triggering and rough for, because that was a pretty rough sentence I just read. So I just want to send some love out there. I wish I'd give it a warning ahead of time from reading it. Then I found Happy Jacks during the reign of Uncle Stu. It was a series of tools through email questions. It helped me climb out of the hole I found myself in, constantly being reminded of things that used to come naturally. With that came a community that is very supporting and loving. It's a group of people I have literally laughed with, surviving the horrible players of Karen and the Sexecutioner, and cried with. Rest in peace, my awesome GM Mike. You continue to be a beacon of light to save. You continue to be a beacon of light to this day. I think that meant to me, continue to be a beacon of light to me to this day, possibly.
Probably.
Yeah.
But what matters is I am running tabletop games. I have run some LARP in the past few years. I am living a life I consider worth living. And I wanted to say thank you because Happy Jacks will probably never truly realize how responsible they are for that. Okay, some questions based on this email. Outside of Happy Jacks, where do you go to hone your GMing skills? What's the one sentence either you say or you think people should say before running a game? Mine is, be a fan of the PCs. Again, thank you. Until I end up with a quandary, please stay gaming, stay tipsy, and stay diverse. Eric from New Jersey.
Huzzah.
I'm
Thank
also
you.
just dropping something in chat right now, which is a link to the National Mental Health hotline that you can call. Can vary in your local area, but just
Why
something
don't you
to
read
be
it
aware
out
of.
for the podcast listeners
Yeah.
if you're going to do that?
It is mentalhealthhotline.org is probably the easiest way to get to it, and then they have phone numbers or for different parts of the country.
And then this is only if you're in the U.S.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, it's these are the resources I have. And 988 is the suicide and crisis line that is available to us here. So,
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, that was. Thank you, Eric. We're glad that we could kind of help you through that, and it's great to know that finding community and finding just resources can be like the first step. It's really important, and just like not stopping. It's good. Yeah. So yeah, questions at the end. Where did you go to hone your jamming skills?
I do think that outside of Happy Jacks, I do think that having home games and having games that you're not doing for a presentation or for an audience and you're doing with friends that you trust and that you care about is a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
And then I also think for me as someone who is starting to dip her toes into some more professional GMing, I think having a variety of different tables really helps you because you're learning ways to react. So I think if you're someone who might not want to be a professional GM but you want to get better at GMing and GM more, I think if there are gaming cons that are happening near you, they almost always need people to run games. So I think seeking out those kind of things, look for events in your area that are running games and look for games that you think you could run. I think
I think they're asking just personal stories.
Oh,
Where
I
do
see.
we go to practice our GMing?
Oh yeah, for me it's it's running home games with my friends, and also I was saying I like running games. I like being forced to run games for people who are not my typical table so that I can get better at adapting to different things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 100%. I would say teaching, but also I think the best thing, I got really good at GMing not that I'm really good, but going through kind of the boot camp of for so long not running campaigns, running one shot after one shot after one shot after one shot at conventions with a whole bunch of different people.
Yeah.
And it just made me really quick on my feet. So kind of the same answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also just want to say thank you, Eric, very much for sharing, and it resonates a lot. Just struggling with depression and anxiety, and finding community in tabletop games it's just such a beautiful thing. I think every gaming store that I go to, just to browse the aisles, I just feel a sense of comfort and security. And
Yeah.
and you're in a wonderful, wonderful hobby and amazing community. So thank you for sticking around, Eric. I've been kind of obsessively listening to podcasts and reading weird games. I just like to go on itch.io sometimes and just go down a rabbit hole just to see what kind of weirdness is out there. Games that are they're supposed to be played as a comic book. Games where supposed to be played with flipping a coin. Just weird stuff. There's there's a game that I back to Kickstarter off, and now they're doing like another one, but it's called Psychic Trash Detectives, and it's a GMless game that's supposed to be played without dice. Instead, it's supposed to be played with the trash you have in your bag.
Wow.
And you like dump the trash out on the table, and you're supposed to play these rodents who like they like touch the trash and they like remember where the trash was, and they like piece together the puzzle. You know, so I go to where I hone my GMing skills is by thinking about the way people play games,
Yeah.
because there's so many other ways that people engage with games. Even though I end up gravitating towards the same 3 or 4 styles of play often, and I
Right.
try to branch out. But that or like another friend of the pod, Mo Poplar, is a really great board game
Yeah.
designer. He's been kind of dragging me back into playing board games. That's a fun way. And similar to what Riley said, I think having a variety of tables is such a good way to like learn just like what people respond to. Also, I was gonna say, yeah, try producing some theater, directing some theater. That was really helpful for me, helping me to hone my
Yeah.
GP skills. It's a great way to learn some facilitating tools. But yeah,
Build
a
off what you
variety.
just said about board games. I think narrative board games, like finding narrative board games, will make you a better GM. They make, I think, like playing. We played For the Queen a couple times at StrategyCon, and I felt like, wow, this is a really great game for getting people to understand like how to tell a story collectively. So I think games like that, where you're at everyone's turn is adding to a narrative, like I think it
Those are awesome.
takes away a lot of like the anxieties of having to roll dice or having to have a character sheet or having things. It's just like diving into the purity of we are building a narrative together, and I think
Yeah.
it's a good warm up for getting better at that.
Those are super rad. Sydney Icarus has a really cool one called Decaying Orbit, which is
Yeah.
another
I
sort
need
of
to
like
play that.
so rad. But I would say, Riley, yes, and I also like those really weird, obscure like Euro games, which is such a problematic term, and it's just like needs to be changed. But like the ones where you
It's a
have
Games
to,
Paris.
yeah, you have to
Deep
come up
cut,
with a
sorry.
story behind why you have 3 coins here and 4 crystals and 2 little meeples. like you have to do this abstract like piecing together a story. Like I think that also is like a fun little brain challenge.
Yeah,
So.
for sure.
I don't know if this is a very intuitive or helpful answer, but at the cons, so it started as, I'm gonna prove how bad this is. That was what I was thinking. I went to Adventurers League, and I've reported at that con immediately. I had a good time. What was I supposed to do? I showed up prepared to hate the experience and had fun instead.
How
Fuck
dare
me,
you.
I guess.
How dare
Right?
you.
But where I went to help hone my GMing skills recently, where I feel like I've got my rhythm down, I like the way I run things, I feel really confident, going to see professional GMs running like competitive Dungeons and Dragons was, it's on some level it was like, yep, I don't want to do that. That's fine, right? But it was helpful because I understood what I didn't want to do and what I didn't like about it and what I did like about it. And it just helped carve out, I love For the Queen, I love, all these little weird story games that we have. But I also know I don't love belonging outside belonging. Sorry, everybody. It's just doesn't work for me. And most GM-less games it doesn't hit for me. That's fine. I'm glad people love it. I'm glad people like black licorice. That means I don't have to eat it.
Jason, nobody's gonna be upset that it's okay. You don't have to apologize for not liking a thing.
No, I know. I'm
Because
saying
you are.
I'm excited that other people like it.
Okay.
Right? Like I feed off of
Right,
it.
Let
but
people not
this
like
is like
things.
part of an apology. Like you can like it. I'm not. Like it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. But the point is, I like learned something about those types of games. I also learned something from GMs running competitive, point-based, like tracked records, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was a fruitful experience for me because I had never done it, and I would encourage you to try. Like that sounds like hell to you. I thought it would be too, and I had a good time.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I think by watching or playing with lots of different GMs, like I think that's one of those things where it's like the more things you experience, the better you're going to be about it. Just like tasting a bunch of different types of food will make you a better cook or whatever. Just because you're able to be like, oh, I really dislike how they do that. I'm not going to do that. Oh, I really love how they do this. I'm going to steal that and add that into my GMing. It's just like it helps you think of things you never thought of because that's not how your brain works, but their brain works that way. So like, oh, yoink, I love that. Gonna do that from now on. Like all the best things I do about GMing are probably stolen from somebody else who I saw it from, and I was like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fold that in. Like just fold it in.
fold it in.
Fold it in.
I want to give a shout out to the Games on Demand folks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so fun.
Who do all these story games. Honestly, there are things I didn't expect I was gonna like, and ultimately what I discovered was I just like games.
Yeah.
I'll just play anything.
Game
Yeah.
And they're so cool, yeah.
And then what's
thank God.
one sentence that either you say or you think people should say before running a game?
I only have an example of when I'm trying to do an accent. Like I have a trigger for bad Scottish. It's all right then, and then I'm into it. And then the other one is, hello, it's Alexei Kuznetsov. And do bad Russian instead, and that's it. That's the extent of my bad accents.
Yeah.
But those are my trigger sentences for that.
There's a word for that, and I don't remember in acting, but for Irish, mine is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Yeah,
I do
that's
that one
great.
a little bit too.
Yeah, it's like boom.
Jason had the experience of watching me. I had a character with like a Dublin Irish accent, but we had another player at the table who was playing Scottish, and every time after his turn, when I would start talking again, I would be Scottish.
Yeah.
It was happening every
Amazing.
Yeah. And then halfway through, I remembered I wanted to do bad Russian
Yeah.
for my character, so I just piled onto the mess, and we all had a good
So
time.
good, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
Faith
cute.
and Begora is one for me with
Yeah.
Irish.
Oh,
It's
Faith
because
and
of those
Begora.
Spider-Man cartoons when I was a child.
What is the phrase?
Oh, Faith and Begora.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a very cute, there's like a cute chant that we used to do in high school theater, but it started with apparently it was like some teacher from like the 60s who like started the theater program at this high school, but the first thing she would say before every show, she would say like, we're here to do two things, to tell a good story and to have a good time. And I feel like that's a fun thing to say before any game. I also often say to myself as I'm prepping for games, I just go, fuck me running. I'm just it's my running through things. It's just a little mantra I say.
That seems
"Fuck me
difficult,
running."
but
Fuck me
cool.
running.
That would be just
Multitasking
physical.
my-
That is
a
on
challenge.
another
Yeah.
not my interest in any way. Anything involving running is a big turnoff for me, but if you like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't think I have a sentence. I think if I'm like maybe I should have one. I feel like maybe as like a mantra is gonna have. I do have like occasional like weird like hand gestures that I'll do. Like when I was doing improv a lot, whenever I was on the back line, I would do like a weird like my hand and then twist, and it was or like this. It was almost like me like. Okay, I'm turning on the game
Okay.
now. Like, it
Yeah.
was like that was kind of like how I was
Interesting.
behaving.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I have done that. Like, okay, I'm clocked in. You know, so that might be part of it.
I wonder if I have any gestures like
Yeah.
Cool.
When I was a writer, I used to always check in on Foursquare for a long time or similar things. I stopped doing that after when those apps kind of started thus being less fun to use. But I would like when I got to a place and I would check in that I was at the place because that was me clocking into work so I could get writing.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay.
Do you all have some kind of a food that gets you in the zone for a game night?
coffee.
Caffeine.
Yeah,
All right.
that.
Caffeine in any form.
I just realized it's Eric from New Jersey, and I used to live in New Jersey.
So pork roll.
But, Taylor Ham.
Oh.
Excuse me.
Excuse me. You know what? It's funny is I usually call it Taylor Ham, and I've been yelled at by North Jersey guys enough that it's pork roll. But now I'm saying pork roll.
It's, yeah. It's just such a. Whew.
Whatever it is, it's delicious, and I like
It's a
it.
civil war.
Yeah.
Pork roll versus Taylor Ham.
What is your actual thing though?
I mean, yeah, I
Fuck me running.
caffeine.
No, it is pork roll. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Taylor
we're
Ham.
just
Sorry. Yeah.
multitasking.
Like, I know I am an aggressively mellow person most of the time, and that doesn't work, particularly on stream.
Yeah.
You know, like, I have to bring my energy up, and that's like caffeine and sugar is the way I start a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's always a mistake in my mind to have a drink, like an alcoholic drink, when I'm going to be running a game.
yeah.
Like I always think it'll be a good idea. It never.
No,
is.
I can't.
I've learned,
I can't
yeah.
drink. I don't smoke anything. It just doesn't help me be a better GM or player. So I just don't during games. If people do, that's fine. It doesn't work for me.
As a player, I can do it, but even then, it has to be like the game has to have already started. I can't be at the very beginning. But like it does make me sleepy after a while, so I have to be careful with it. But yeah.
Like all things, like I'm very millennial. Like I have my caffeine drink to keep me awake. I have my alcoholic drink to like keep me mellow and enjoying myself.
Fair.
I have my water to like keep myself hydrated. I have just like my bevy of beverages
Yeah.
at all times for
I have
all
my whiskey
things.
drink. I have my cider drink. I have my lager drink. I have my lager drink.
My exception to that is
I get the saving throw.
I get advantage on saving throws versus tequila, so I'll have tequila when I don't want to get drunk. right? Like, that's my fun drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think pizza's a great GM. Like
Oh.
if but maybe like in the middle of the game or after game, depending on the setting, like it's nice, but because you don't want to get like all greasy and
also,
but there's something about getting pizza after you've been playing a game.
I often come to the table a little hungry. Like I time it, like I know I'm gonna eat like 4 hours from now, so I'm like on the edge of death at the end of the game. But that works for me. So
God.
I'm not going to encourage anyone to do that. I don't think that's probably good behavior.
I would TPK my party and get food at that
Right.
point. I'm like, nope, sorry y'all, there's chips in the other room,
I
and
just-
I go do it.
Yeah, I just started having a bunch of food in the game.
Yeah.
Like, it slowly starts weaving its way in. You walk by, there's like a bakery, and there's just like the most amazing donuts you've ever
It's
seen.
just, if I'm full, I want to take a
game-
nap.
Yeah.
And if I'm a little hungry, full of sugar and caffeine, it's going to be a good time.
Yeah,
I don't
a
know
little
what's
more-
going to happen, but it's going to be fun.
Every game becomes Toddy the Chance of Meatballs for me at that point. Where it's just like, you enter the town of Chew and Swallow. And, yeah.
Oh, boy. I want to
Wow,
go
it's a
there.
special place.
No, it goes
That's
it
me
goes
running,
badly,
right?
Jason. Have you not read the book?
That's
It
why I
ends up
wanna go
horribly
there.
for all of them.
That's why
they
I
have
wanna
to
go there.
flee.
Yeah.
It's a real place in the.
It's a book called
It's a-
Toddy the Chance of
yeah.
Meatballs,
It's
and
a
like
kid's book.
it's like it starts to
But
rain
there's a town
food.
called the Town of Chew and Swallow.
Yeah, because originally the town just had it just
childhood
had,
books
listen,
are so
originally it was a
weird.
utopian kind of place where food fell from the sky and it was delicious, but then the food gets worse and worse because the storms get worse and worse. So bigger and more destructive food starts to fall from the sky.
Mm.
I spoiled the whole book.
Oh
Sorry.
my god.
I didn't know anything about the book, so
Yeah.
I accept the
There's
title.
a sequel called Pickles to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Wow, we really got deep there, folks. We really went places.
I am unfortunately the kind of ADHD that if I get hungry, I get hangry, and it's not
Yeah.
fun for anybody. So I have to have like at least something to snack on, or I have to have eaten beforehand. And yeah,
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right, mailbag number 3
Oh,
from the
That's right. I
arcade.
dibs this one. Whoa, the Wayback Machine from 2019. If you
it was
can
another
imagine.
world back
That's like
then.
medium
dog-
late for us. Like medium.
Yeah.
But it also feels like anything before 2020 feels like it's on the other side of a wall, like
Yeah.
a galactic barrier.
Yeah.
Like,
Seriously.
True.
Seriously.
Hiya, Jackers. I had an interesting thing happen at my table last night. I have been running a Starfinder game for my group for a few months now as a change up from our usual D&D campaign. It has been going well, but gradually a few player characters have become more and more chaotic. Not that that is a bad thing on its own, it has led to some hilarious moments. Last night, one of them decided to start rolling for self-control in certain circumstances that she chose. I loved the idea. D20 games don't usually have flaw-based mechanics, and I love adding anything to them that will, I assume, spice up the roleplay drama. That will up the roleplay drama, which that stands on its own. This started snowballing, though. Quickly, another character was doing it several times over the session, and then they decided to add some roles for completely different things, like making a disguise or digging through another PC's belongings. This really frustrated me. I would be too. That's me editorializing. Am I wrong in thinking this is annoying? No, you're not. Sorry, I'll finish the letter. I have always been privy to allowing the GM to decide when a role is needed or not. It has me wondering if the game is just boring them. I usually run my campaigns very RP heavy and I don't call for roles often if they are not needed. I think they are all used to the constant perception checks and saves of D&D maybe. Or maybe I'm just used to being the dictator and I should let them be. Keep jacking it. Love you, peeps. Ryan for Flan.
I was so confused at first because I read Starfinder as Starscape, and I was like, "You were playing Starscape in 2019?" And I was like, "God, Kim and Eve been working on the game for a while." But
2020, so like a
Yeah.
year after this.
I know
We're playing-
but it was available to a person to
Before,
play.
yeah.
Demigod's kickstarted in 2019, so that's something. So a couple things. I read it, so I'm gonna go first.
Yeah.
fair.
You're doing everything right, and your players are wrong. That's
Well, that's been our show.
that's it.
Thanks, Aaron.
So first of all, I love flaws in games. If I'm running D&D, I use the standard array because it comes with an 8 and that's a -1, and I demand everybody has a minus stat, something with a minus in it. If somebody wants to point by, as long as they give themselves an 8, I don't care. But like I start with the standard array. there has to be a minus, there has to be a flaw, there has to be something your character's bad at, because it's not interesting if they're good at everything or medium at everything. And that's just how it's going to be in a game that I run. Sorry, that's if you don't like that, there are many other tables you can go to. I would rather that. So there's a couple things here. I love flaws. What I don't love are flaws that are psychological or psychiatric in nature, right? There are flaws in games that are like kleptomaniac or whatever, right? Like there are certain phobias where I think it could make sense. Like, oh, arachnophobia, spiders, scary. Okay. When you see spiders, you have a minus. Okay, that's fine. But like when it's my character's chaotic, that just is permission for the player to act like a goblin. And it's not good. And it's not interesting for a kid. Like, what does chaotic mean to your character? Right? If we want to talk about that, if your character is reckless, okay. But like one of them is always like curious. So you have to roll to not open the thing. Like, no, that's like, there's a bunch of people standing there too. And maybe you see like, oh, there's traps and things pointed at it. Like, clearly don't open the thing. You have to roll to not open it. Like, no, let's just make a decision. Like, I want those to be character choices. You decide what your character's going to do, not have it come down to some random roll based on how you think mental illness works. Like,
Well, I don't know if it's mental illness necessarily, because it's saying rolling for self-control. It doesn't say chaos. Like, I feel...
But they did talk about chaotic things and, like, going through the PC's belongings and, you know, that kind of things. Like, even, like, rolling for self-control, to me, sounds like we're entering risky territory. Right? Like self-control are we talking about alcoholism? Are we talking about drug abuse? Are we talking about not pinching somebody on the ass? You know, like, what do they mean by self-control? Those are just character choices. If your character is an addict, like, that is something we could talk about as a table and have in the game, but it's not going to be a die roll at my table.
Right. Well, I think that's the issue, is like it wasn't going to be a die roll and the players have decided it should be.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the player's deciding that about their own character, I feel that switches things around a little bit, because it's no longer like the GM taking that control out of the player's hands. The players are like, I don't want control. I want to just see what happens with this. But that does get old. I do think, like what you said, like while I feel that changes the power dynamics, and to me it changes a little bit of like the ickiness possibility there, because the player is still making that decision. You're not taking agency away from him. It does start to be an excuse for behaving badly. Well, this is what my character would do because the dice told me.
Yeah, it goes directly into the toxic version of this is what my character would do.
And even if it doesn't, it just gets old after a while. Because it's like, okay, well, this game could be a random table. Fun, super cool. I'm so glad that we all did these backstories so that you could keep rolling to see what you did. Cool. And then like when everyone starts doing it.
And I also have a philosophy at my table that every roll will result in something happening, right? So I don't want the players rolling anything I didn't ask them to roll for, right? Or if they want to pitch to me, I'll be like, hey, can I roll X to accomplish Y? Or like, yes, but here are the risks, right? Because something will happen. It doesn't matter what we're playing. PBTA has it built in. Any game, I am going to have, it's not just going to be nothing happens. If we roll the dice, it's because something is going to happen. If it's a good roll, it's the thing you wanted. If it's a bad roll, it's the thing you didn't want to have happen, right? Like something happens in the narrative. And if you're just randomly rolling dice, like, oh, I put this pocket watch and I steal it, right? Like, why? Like...
Yeah, it's funny. It's something you were saying before too, kind of was making me giggle. Is like the chaotic. Like chaotic is such a broad term.
Yeah,
I instantly pictured like a very like devout like paladin who's like, oh, I'm having a cupcake today. Don't tell my deity.
Yeah, it's so chaotic.
Please don't tell my deity. Like, you know, chaotic. What does that mean to your characters? Could be very, very different.
My character's so random.
Yeah, but you bring up a really good point about like, oh, are we actually saying that there is the possibility that there's these like toxic behaviors that were slightly, we are kind of getting into territory of maybe problematic behavior, maybe the quote unquote murder hobo-ish, you know, behavior, just sort of like unchained. But assuming good intent, right? Bouncing off what you were saying, Kimmy, is that I think there might be some signaling here that the players are doing.
Yeah,
right? They're saying, I'm kind of interested in, maybe there's a Starfinder thing, maybe they're in space, maybe there's like, oh, they're kind of they don't have the words for it, but maybe they're looking for like a stress mechanic. You know, I want to roll for self-control sometimes, or this whole rooting around on other people's stuff. Maybe it's connected to having some kind of consequence for having or not having some kind of deeper connection with another character, and so they're like maybe finding ways to deepen some part of the game. It's interesting because it just seems to me that yes, there's definitely reason to be annoyed, but there's also reason to kind of then pull back and go, oh, what about this? What are they inventing here? What's this new thing that they're presenting?
And like, sorry, just real quick. What like Eric was concerned about, are they doing this because they're bored? That might be the case. But the next step is, let's have a conversation about this. Don't just start doing random shit in our game that we are all doing together, this collaborative, cooperative activity, and you're just randomly adding shit that everybody else didn't agree to yet.
I think I'm going to push back because I think some of it might be that I feel like maybe Ryan is a little bit of a control freak.
Okay, so I am going to bring in some new random mechanics tomorrow night.
Okay. I mean, well, that's the thing. Well, let's look at, because we've been adding a lot to the narrative that isn't in the email. Like, we've been saying, oh, there's toxic things happening. That's nowhere in the email.
No, I said it's the
No,
risk.
okay. But, like, yeah, it is a risk, absolutely. But that's not what they're complaining about. I feel like if there were that problem, I feel that probably would have been included in the text somewhere. I've been super focused on reading, like, text because I'm, like, working on how to get kindergartners to do it, which is really hard. But
It's hard to get adults to do it. It's a little.
the phrasing, at least. Phrasing, we're doing phrasing now. We didn't do phrasing at the end of the last email, or at the beginning of the email. This really frustrates me. Am I wrong in thinking this is annoying? I have always been privy to allowing the GM to decide when a role is needed or not.
Yeah, that part.
That part to me says, and I'm not saying that they're wrong about this, but there's a little bit of like, I want to be the one kind of like herding the cats. It's hard to herd cats when the cats are deciding where they're going to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, because these games, like, different than like what you're saying, belonging, outside belonging games and things like that. These games are made for someone to kind of herd you in a direction.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting like, oh, we're going to go left. No, we're going to go right. We're going to go left. We're going to go right. I'm going to take randomly on the dice. It makes that job so much harder.
Yeah.
And it makes the story less meaningful and less cohesive overall. So I don't think you're wrong to be annoyed, but I think I don't think it's because the player, like I don't think you're worried about you might be worried about the players being bored, but I don't think that's the biggest issue. I think the chaotic nature of just die rolling and having that decide what your character is going to do pulls away from the emotional impact of the story, which probably is a cycle that is causing people to be bored because now nothing means anything or just means less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The choices don't mean you're not making choices,
Right.
so it's not. Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that they said this Starfinder game is a break from their normal D&D campaign, and then it was getting more chaotic. So it kind of feels like maybe this game has just been how these players were letting their hair down, and as a result, that might be why they're being a little bit more wild with their rules, because they're like, oh, we're not doing our regular game, we're doing something kind of different and more silly, and we're going to let that happen.
Yeah.
And on the topic of allowing the GM to decide when a role is needed or not, I will admit this is like a thing that I go back and forth on as both a player and a GM. And it's hard because, like, as a GM, I'm always like, no, let me tell you what to roll, like that is. But there is like, but then as a player, sometimes like it's hard because like I've been at plenty of tables where someone's like, I want to make an insight check. And like they're communicating, I am suspicious of them and I want to check on them, but it's quacker. It's faster. I got quick and faster mixed in one word.
It's quacker.
It's quacker. It's quacker to like just say, this is what I want to do. Let's do this, and we can move forward with it. So like I see both sides of it, because I got chewed out by a GM one time because I was like, I'm gonna do this role, and like did it, and like I was really new to playing 5e, and I remember like the GM was like, people have been kicked out of tables for less than that, and I was like, all right, this seems a little bit much.
That's too much.
Yeah. And it was also, but like, so for a long time I was like so afraid to declare my roles. But then, especially when you're playing like PBTA games, a lot of times because the roles have like fun titles, and you're like, I want to do a figure someone out role, like I'm like, but like, or as a GM, like some, but like, that is the kind of conversation, and I think that what's maybe missing here, and again, this was 5 years ago when these topics weren't as common, but I do feel like a session 0 would be like, hey, do you guys want to describe your roles ahead of time, or do you want to tell me what you think to do and I'll tell you what to roll? Because I think there are versions of it on both sides of it. I think there are times where if a player just says, I want to make a perception check, and I would like, okay, what does this look like to you?
Yeah.
And they don't have any way to describe what their character is doing.
Yeah.
All they're doing is rolling dice to see if I'll give them the answer.
Right.
And that's frustrating as a GM, because it's like, well, what are you what are you role playing? What are you doing?
That's the pre-campaign conversation I want to have with the table that says I am not going to do that as your GM, right?
Yeah.
I'm that's not the table I'm running. And if that's what you want, that's okay, but that's not what's going to happen here.
Right.
I will let you know, if you want to pitch a roll to me, that's fine. Let's talk it out. Like you said, you want to roll perception. I might say, well, perception's for when something passive is what you really want to do is roll investigation. Do you want to roll investigation? No, that bonus isn't as high because I have wisdom instead of intelligence. Okay, so it would be an investigation roll to do what you're describing. Do you still want to do it?
Yeah.
Right? Because something will happen when you roll the dice.
Yeah.
Something will happen, no matter what.
Yeah.
On the flaws thing, I do think that it's better. I like when characters have flaws as well. And on top of the standard array, one thing that I am sad has been kind of taken out of 2024 5e is that all the backgrounds usually have that table in 2014 rules where you roll for traits. It's still on D&D Beyond, when you build a character, but it's not part of the official character sheet anymore. I liked being there's a list of this is the kind of character I'm playing. Even if I didn't use what they listed, I like having the prompts of I know that my character has these flaws. But that is, for me, that is not a signal for I'm going to roll the dice sometimes to see if I do these things. That is me going, this is notes to me as a role player.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, it's if you want your character to be someone who might possibly steal from another player's belongings, you've now entered into a PvP situation, whether you roll the dice or not for it.
Right.
So it's does your table allow PvP? If it does, then that player should have to make the choice to do the thing and suffer the consequences or not do it. But don't roll the dice and then go, well, the dice told me I had to do it that way. So that's how I did it.
Yeah.
So that's where I would be concerned about it. But again, that comes back to talking to your players, having a discussion about it, and saying, okay, if you guys want to have flaws, I think you should just role play those flaws as character traits and not random things you're rolling in the middle of stories.
Yeah, and don't give character points for them. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that also gets back to what you were saying about them letting their hair down. Because it literally says, last night one of them decided. So this is something that they'd never done before. This player was like, hey, this would be fun, and thought of it, and it probably was fun at first. But then it got annoying super quick.
Yeah.
So I think it really, when you said that really vibed for me. I feel like it was hey, this is our off campaign. This is our side quest. This is fun. Let's be weird. Let's have just go a little wild with it. And I think they're just I think there's not a ton to be worried here, since it doesn't seem like it's a long-term campaign anyway. And as long as they're not being toxic with it, well, it can be fun.
What it sounds like is they were following the fun.
Yeah.
And then somebody, the GM in this case, wrote an email that is, are we fucking around or are we playing?
Yeah.
That's what's happened.
Exactly what's happened. 100%.
Threw the pencil down.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's if you don't like it, you're the GM too. It's okay, we're not going to do that anymore.
that's where X card comes
or
in.
maybe
Hey,
once,
guys.
once a session you can do it. Super fun.
This is also there's the other side of this that I'm really in favor of is playing your character like you stole it. They are suddenly playing their characters like they stole it because it's not part of their main campaign, and suddenly they don't care if they die, they don't care if they get arrested, they don't care if their ship blows up, because we're only playing for a couple weeks and whatever happens, what if you could capture that part of what they're getting out of this experience and bring that back to the D&D campaign? Not that they should be chaotic and random all the time, but just hey, this thing you're feeling where it doesn't really matter what happens to your character and we just want to tell a fun, interesting story, maybe sad, maybe dramatic, whatever, that only happens when you play your character like you stole it.
Yeah.
It's so funny. This just reminded me of a buddy of mine was complaining. He's in this Pathfinder game, and there's just one player who is playing a cleric, and she's playing the cleric very devout, true to life. But her thing is, every time there's any loot, she steals all the money. And she just like, as this cleric, just takes all the money, and she like keeps like making these justifications, like, "Oh, well, I'll find a good purpose for this money." And she's just like, and it's really funny because some of the other players are like, "Well, what's up? Like, why we all worked on this and stuff?" And my buddy's like, "Well, my purpose is sort of like a weird wizard, doesn't really care about gold," and then he says, "But outside of the game, she's the sweetest person. She doesn't do any of this kind of like law breaking. She'd be the last person to offend anyone." Like, yeah, there's this whole hair down thing that is so like interesting and lovely. It also coming back to something else about that was earlier about the GM roles. I feel like I'm very like I don't have a hard and fast rule about it. We just were doing a recap of Old Gate Adventures and an actual play on the Happy Jacks network. And there was a really fantastic moment where one of the players was talking to my player, my character's kind of like a beefy but not necessarily the most like slick like barbarian barista lady. That's right, a barbarian barista. And the other player is doing this sort of like this she's this courtesan. She knows how to read people. She knows how to spy out people's like quirks. And as she's like asking me something, I know something she's asking something about my character that my character would be absolutely lying about. And I actually had to like sort of pause and say, "Hey, I just want to like offer this because I think you're super observant. Your character would totally be picking up on this. Can I offer that maybe your character might do some kind of an insight check to intuit what's going on, because I think you would notice that my character's sweating, blah, blah." And I literally was saying in the recap, I was like, I as a human being am just a much better liar than this character I'm playing. So if I'm just talking to you and I'm like, oh, it might not be coming across that this character's actually sweating, biting her nails, sticking her arms in her armpits, smelling them like she's doing a bad poker face. And it was like, narratively, it was like, hey, GM, I'm going to offer this. Is this all right? Like, because the GM might be has a ton of stuff to juggle in their head. Yep. So they might not be thinking about like, well, this person is hiding a secret, and you should probably intuit that. Yeah. Right. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm Riley. I'm so sorry about that GM that just chewed you out.
I mean, those teenager, it happens.
Too much.
Yeah. Oh no, the one I mentioned. Yeah, that was actually more recently. But yeah, that was 5e. Yeah.
There's grognards everywhere.
Yeah.
And, that's what happens.
Yeah.
All right.
I also do think that my phrase I'm going to say before winning a game from now on is going to be, "Are we fucking around or are we playing?"
I know.
All right, are we fucking around or are we playing?
Yeah.
It's something you play like a poker game, right?
Yeah.
But you have to think of Ed Wood when
you have to throw a pencil across the room.
Yeah.
I think about Ed Wood when Bela Lugosi has just like shot up and he comes down the hill like, "All right, let's shoot this fucker."
Oh yeah,
that's so great.
Amazing. All right, thank you for joining us for Season 34, Episode 12. Please support our amazing Indie Designer of the Month, Steve D. Him from Tin Star Games, and you can find him on tinstargames.itch.io or tinstargames.com. Thank you to our chat mod, James B., and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. Do it through their website with a credit card instead of through Apple Pay. My name is Kimmy.
My name is Riley.
My name is Artam.
And I'm Jason. We're doing plugs too, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I got a plug.
Yeah. Check out my Twitch channel. That's where I'm doing a lot of shit. Is at It's Probably Okay, or probablyokgames.com, home of the okayest games around. One game. There will be more, but that's where you can find my stuff. So.
You can catch new episodes of my podcast and YouTube show, Scary Movie and a Sandwich, coming at the end of this month. If you like horror movies and if you like sandwiches, this is going to be your favorite show ever.
What if I really like sandwiches and okay with horror movies?
It's perfect for you as well. Yes. Great for foodies, great for freaks.
My podcast that was the Doctor Who podcast, Game of Rassilon, we have rebranded as a brand new show called Good Chaotic. It's our own IP. We are using the Scum and Villainy system, and we are finally about to launch. We're going to launch next month, October, if you're hearing this at a later date. We're going to drop our Session 0 on October 2nd. We're going to drop our series premiere on October 16th. But if you are a Patreon supporter, we're going to drop each one of those earlier for our Patreon supporters, and you can go to patreon.com/goodchaoticpod to check that out. And obviously, as we've just discussed, you might want to do that on your computer instead of your iPhone. But yeah, we are now that we are jumping into a brand new show. We are about to launch it, and I think we're going to drop a trailer fairly soon. By the time this episode drops as a podcast, the trailer might already be out. I heard it today, and I'm very excited. I'm actually it's such a satisfyingly fun show to be doing. I think that dropping the IP and really doing our own thing and having fun with it, and having played together now for 5 years as a group, we hit a zone really quickly and early on, and it's some of the most fun I've had around a table in a long time. So
That's awesome.
I'm so excited for y'all to hear it.
Cool. What was the title again?
Good Chaotic.
Good Chaotic. All right.
Yeah, it's gonna be a podcast.
Yay!
Amazing. Oh my god, that
Very
sounds
good.
awesome.
I'm excited.
Yep. Awesome. Today we're going to leave you with a song called Whiskey You're the Devil by the Poxy Boggarts, and you can find their music at poxyboggarts.com.
Why not both?
What?
It's Whiskey You're the
You're
Devil.
the Devil.
Oh, I thought you said whiskey or the devil.
No,
I was
Whiskey
like,
You're the Devil. It is both.
kind of interested in both.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I got good news for you.
It's a great song for that. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Oh, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, kinder, decenter, you're spunkier than Tay. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunker, sober.
So now, brave boys, we're on the march and off to Portugal and Spain. Drums are beaten, banners fly, and the devils all home will come tonight. Oh, love, fare thee well. With me tither idle doodle da me tither idle doodle da me rakes fall to the laddie. Oh, there's whiskey in the jar.
Oh, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, kinder, decenter, you're spunkier than Tay. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunker, sober.
Well, the French are fighting boldly, men are dying hot and coldly. Give every man his flask of powder, his firelock on his shoulder. Oh, love, fare thee well. With me to the raddle doodle da me to the raddle doodle da me rikes full to a laddie. Oh, there's whiskey in the jar.
Oh, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, kinder, decenter, you're spunkier than Tay. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunker, sober.
Says the mother, don't you wrong me. Don't take me daughter from me. For if you do, I will torment you. And after death, me ghost will haunt you. Love, fare thee well. With me tither idle doodle da me tither idle doodle da me right fall to a laddie. Oh, there's whiskey in the jar.
Oh, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, kinder, decenter, you're spunkier than Tay. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunker, sober. Oh, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, kinder, decenter, you're spunkier than Tay. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunker, sober.